Hi, welcome back. In the last video, you got a nice introduction to the world of computer audio, primarily with a focus on virtual instruments. And one topic we covered was the idea of there being two different types of virtual instruments, the sampled variety and the synthesized variety. And we had mentioned that virtual drumline is a sampled variety. So I'm here in Kontakt Player 2. I've got a snare line manual instrument loaded up, and I just wanted to play a few sounds just so you could hear some of the actual sampled sounds that were recorded for the library. There, so that's just a few, but you can actually hear their recorded sounds. You know, they're not synthesized sounds. They were actually recorded with a microphone, and then all of these samples were compiled together to create instruments, and the instruments were compiled together to create a library. So those are just a few important terms that you'll want to remember in the future. For instance, this snare line manual is this .nki file, which is a Native Instruments Kontakt instrument. And then here under multis, we have the Native Instruments Kontakt multi.nkm. You can also have nkb, which is Native Instruments Kontakt banks, but that's a topic we'll cover later. The next thing I want to cover is the difference between Kontakt Player and the full version of Kontakt. The biggest difference is that Kontakt Player, while it has a lot of the functionality in terms of loading instruments and saving multis, doesn't have some of the features that Kontakt has. For instance, if I click here on the little cogs, that just brings up my instrument options and things you can configure for the instrument. So I'll go ahead and close that. And really all you have the ability to do here on the left side is navigate the libraries and instruments. So any Kontakt Player instruments or libraries that you have installed will show up here. Now if I swap over to the full version of Kontakt, you can see here over on the left side there's quite a few more tabs. Now I'm in Kontakt 4, but you would have a lot of the same options even in Kontakt 2, the comparable version for when Kontakt Player 2 came out. So then you can move on here to the Libraries tab. This will be similar to Kontakt Player, but here on this Files tab, this is actually more or less a file browser. You're able to load in individual waves and samples if you'd like. But if you do own the full version of Kontakt, feel free to explore here, check out the manual. The thing I want to focus on a little more, coming over here, clicking on that same edit button that I did in Kontakt Player 2, this will actually allow me to edit and make changes to this virtual drumline instrument. For instance, I've got the mapping editor already open. You can see here, each little blue column is actually a sound. For instance, right here, these are the buzz roll sounds. These are my hit sounds. And each time there's a little line here, that's actually a different velocity level, so you can see where some of them kind of overlap, but this would be your softer sample, and then gradually getting louder up to these higher velocity samples. So that's the biggest difference there between Kontakt and Kontakt Player 2, is that Kontakt is actually a full featured sampler, and there are other things you can edit in here, but that's where I'm going to leave that. The next topic I wanted to cover is the idea of using, whether it be Kontakt Player or the full version of Kontakt, using them as either a standalone or a plugin. So I've got a little visual aid here, something we can check out. First, we'll talk about the idea of running Kontakt or Kontakt Player as a standalone. And basically what that means is you start up the software on its own. It's not running within any other software. And normally, you'll have some sort of MIDI controller, whether it be a MIDI keyboard or a mallet cat or an actual MIDI sequencer or notation software that's really just kind of used as the controller or the sequencer. And you'll be sending MIDI data out of that, whether it be through an actual MIDI setup on an audio interface or something along those lines, or a virtual MIDI cable all within the computer, which will then get sent to Kontakt or Kontakt Player. And you know, that's one way to go about doing it. And prior to, especially with Finale and Sibelius, allowing you to run plugins, that was the way you really had to do it. But now you're able to run Kontakt and Kontakt Player 2 as plugins. And basically the way that works is you'll have some sort of host program. In most people's cases, when writing music for percussion ensemble, marching band, indoor drumline, you'll most likely use either Finale or Sibelius. But you could also use a digital audio workstation, whether it be Logic, Cubase, Sonar, Pro Tools, or something along those lines. And you'll essentially be sending MIDI data inside the program to the plugin. So it's all essentially contained within the host program. And the type of plugin might be an audio unit if it's on a Mac. Could also be a VST or a DXI or an RTAS, depending on which platform you're working in. Now, I personally prefer, and I think most people prefer, to work with plugins, and it's for a variety of reasons. First is the one I already mentioned. Everything is contained within the host, and normally, as a result of that, you can actually set up a project you're working on, whether it be a Finale, a notation file, Sibelius file, or some digital audio workstation project. You can set it up once and save it, and the next time you open the project, all of your plugins and everything will already be set up. And for that reason, it's just typically simpler to use, and it's more tightly integrated into the software setup. So there you go. There's an overview of standalone versus plugin. And the last thing I want to cover before moving on to the next video is, what do you need to use Virtual Drumline 2.5? The first and obvious thing would be some sort of computer. You'll also need some sort of host, namely Sibelius, Finale, or a sequencer or digital audio workstation of some sort, and Virtual Drumline, obviously. As far as the system requirements go, you can read here, Windows XP or those specs or higher, Mac OS 10.4 or higher, a DVD drive to install the software, 1 GB of RAM or more is recommended. I would suggest getting at least 2, depending on the size of the project. That'll just give you a little bit more of a buffer. Will ensure that you don't run out of RAM. A MIDI keyboard is highly recommended, but it's not necessarily required. And when we get into the Finale and Sibelius videos later, I think you'll see how it's beneficial to use them. But I know plenty of people who work without them. And obviously, you need the desire to learn and to become awesome. So that's basically it for this video. In the next video, you'll get a nice tour of Kontakt Player 2. So if you stick around, we'll see you next time.